Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for checking out my show, Coin Stories, where I get to hear from the leading voices in Bitcoin, financial markets and investing, political structures, philosophy, and more. Please make sure you're subscribed to the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like the video so more people see it, and hit that notifications button so you don't miss out on any new content. This podcast does not provide financial advice. It is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So make sure to do your own research before making any investment decision and be aware of your risk tolerance. I'm able to produce this show thanks to my sponsors, and I'm very picky about who I choose to partner with. So I hope you take the time to listen to the ad reads throughout the show. All right, now to my first partner, where I buy my Bitcoin, Swan. I'm proud to partner with Swan because it is a Bitcoin-only company focused on helping people save for their future and self-custody their Bitcoin, not trade it. Swan offers a private client service, retirement planning, tax loss harvesting, and even home equity conversion. Swan is also committed to educating millions of future Bitcoiners through free educational resources and media projects. I actually use Swan to dollar cost average every day. I deposit a little bit every day that's equivalent to what I might spend on a meal because I actually read that dollar cost averaging daily ends up with a lower cost basis than weekly or bi-monthly at the end of a given year. Swan also produces my show, Hard Money, which reports on Bitcoin adoption and macro trends around the world. So make sure to subscribe to that as well. And to learn more and get $10 in free Bitcoin when you sign up, head to swanbitcoin.com/Natalie Brunell. All right, it's time for the show. Amanda, I'm so excited to do this with you. I'm so grateful that I've met you through the Bitcoin space. You are so fascinating, and you've done like everything. You have multiple degrees, you've had the coolest jobs, you've worked in DC, and you're an expert skier here in Wyoming. I mean, what don't you do?
Not an expert. I have fun though. A novice.
Amanda actually skied in here, and she planned and organized.
I didn't. I cheated today.
You did?
I took a car this time. I was going to, and then I was like, if I get lost getting here, I'm not going to make it on time.
Well, we're here because of you. The Ski Summit, you organize it. I know it takes a lot of work to organize an event like this, especially during a bear market. But for people that are maybe unfamiliar, tell us about it. Tell us about the Ski Summit and why it's important to orange pill the people of Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Yeah. So I moved here almost 4 years ago, got really burnt out and just needed to be in nature. Grew up in Colorado. And so I knew I needed the mountains, but honestly, those mountains are a little too busy. So I did this little tour of, Colorado and New Mexico and Utah, and then ended here. I'd been here one other time and knew it was a very special place. So this was like the grand finale, and I just found a way to come here. And I think it is such a unique place. Because of, so many folks coming in and out of here, it's always very interesting. So it's like, how do I move to a place with 30,000 people? I'm going to be bored out of my mind. But it's like they're constant, like diamonds in the rough, like really interesting, just human beings. Skiers to athletes and musicians and, then the Fortune 500 board members and beyond. So it's a pretty unique place. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you drive around here, the resort, the houses are crazy. And the first thing I always think when I see even the house that we're in right now for this interview, I'm like, what does this person do?
I know.
What did they do in fiat that worked out so well for them?
Yeah.
There are a lot of really interesting people here. So why the Ski Summit? Why did you want to bring people out here for it? And the panels were great yesterday. They were different from last year and really unique. Everything from Bitcoin mining to Bitcoin culture, which you've been talking about, and Bitcoin in the future. So why don't you share why you were so inspired to do this?
Yeah, sure. So when I first moved here, it was 2019. I was still going to Asia and Europe a lot for work, and then COVID stopped that. So I was, stuck here for me, and spent 2.5 months before they shut the skiing down, shut everything down, just skiing like every day. And I would go on this lift called APRÉS, which means after you in French. And it was like my warm-up lift for the morning, and it was also the warm-up lift for most of the local boomers. And so I saw COVID coming, and I would just kind of talk to them about it, and I'd be like, well, what do you think about Bitcoin? And then as the weeks went on, there was more curiosity about like Black Swan, like maybe Bitcoin has a role in that, right? And so so just accidentally, just talking to people, started orange pilling some folks, and some of them came to the conference. But then at the same time, like, well, there's this interesting kind of intersection of risk takers in Bitcoin and skiing. Like, what if we bring them together, right?
I was really impressed by how good of skiers some of the Bitcoiners are. We have a Telegram chat for the ski summit, and people are doing backflips. You took them out with an expert guide, right? I mean, how do you guys know how to ski so well?
Yeah, I think a lot of us grew up doing, like, I'm very fortunate. My mom used to take me up to Winter Park, and she always found a way to get me up there. So I was on skis when I was 2. I was much braver when I was a kid. Now I'm kind of like a little less, I'm taller, so it's a little more risky to do these things. But
I was with the kids on the bunny hills. They're so cute. They don't use the poles, and they look like little marshmallows with their outfits. It's really adorable. You know, it's funny. I was on the chairlift, and I rode with a random couple, and they were actually discussing real estate. And I don't know if their numbers were accurate, but they were discussing how one of their friends bought a place here maybe 5 to 10 years ago for a couple $100,000, and they just sold it in the last year for 1.2. And of course, it made me start thinking about everything we talked about.
And that's probably
like
an apartment.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, we use real estate as a store of value because we have nothing better. And it made me realize how that couple probably doesn't know anything about Bitcoin, right? But we don't even question the system that we're in. We just assume, prices go up. Yeah. Our real estate's going to go up. Things are going to get more expensive, and we can't do anything about it. Yeah. And with all of the work that you've done, especially with, policies, why are we programmed like this?
Yeah, I think, it's a few things. I think those of us who've been rewarded by a certain system don't see a problem with that system, but there are so few people that are really rewarded by that system. The rest of it's marketing and, all of these things. So the interesting part about, Bitcoiners is probably, the early ones, a lot of divergent thinkers. And so I think that's allowed them to, unfortunately, not be benefited by the system or not fit in with the system. So to be able to see things from a different angle and to find Bitcoin earlier. And so I think that's the unique part about this. It's like kind of a superpower now, right? Being able to see things in a different light. And especially in times of chaos and unknown futures, that's really kind of a very valuable characteristic, or what was maybe a deficit before is now a huge asset.
I want to learn more about your journey to Bitcoin, but let's go back even further than that. So you mentioned you're from Colorado, always loved nature. What was your upbringing like? And maybe was there a seed planted where you might be curious about Bitcoin when you finally learned about it, or thought we do need something that fixes the system? Yeah.
So, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, dropped out of college after my sophomore year, started a company, realized I didn't want to be a doctor. I lost the stomach for it. Wow. And then, I was either going to be like Indiana Jones classic major, going into, going on archaeological digs.
Really?
Cool. I really loved Latin. I had a very good Latin professor. So because I was pre-med, I took Latin. I loved this guy. Yeah, he was amazing. And just so much philosophy, and so, so interesting in that history and like wisdom, in some of these older languages. And then I ended up saying, okay, well, but I've always had this kind of like entrepreneurial bend. What if I take a year off, start a business, see if I'm good at that? And
what kind of business?
The first company I had was a concierge service. We worked with older adults in their homes. Wow. But we didn't start that way. I worked at an architecture firm when I was in high school and first 2 years of college as like an executive assistant. Oh. So I knew how to do like everything but nothing, And so at first it was a concierge service, and then the economy tanked, and these like architects or, executives that we were working with, be like, well, can you take my mom to an appointment? This like, greatest generation, 80-year-old women, basically. And I was like, I will do that. It's like hanging out. I love my grandparents. This is awesome. Yeah. So I didn't send employees for that. I would do it, and just really fell in love with that and saw how much of a need there was. But the way we're marketed careers, it's like nobody talks about this giant demographic change. Oh, yeah. Right? So I think it was seeing things differently. You look at countries around the world. China has a 4-2-1 family structure. So it's almost like a martini glass. You have 4 older adults, right, 2 middle-aged, and then a child. And then if they can get married, they can have 2 now. So it's like how are you going to take care of it? So really got into demographics and thinking of things in a much bigger picture by working with older adults, and then started traveling a lot around like longevity and aging and innovation.
Okay, I want to come back to some of that, because there's some interesting things about the demographics recently and comparing us to China and all of that, and millennials where we're at. But what was your next step after that? How did you ultimately come to, you eventually worked with Chaum.
Yeah. So we were trying to, innovate aging and being able to stay in your home instead of these like senior living farms, right? I think it's really unnatural to put older people just with older people, and their sense of the purpose to be older is to pass on your wisdom and your insight to younger generations. So when you separate and you no longer have these multi-generational families or structures, so we have single family homes, we have kids in school all day, we have older people in these homes or isolated, I think it's really hurting us at a very developmental level, but also at an end of life level. So so I think that's why the bookend generations are so sick right now, is because they need to be together more. And all of us in the middle, we're so busy working and so in the drama of life that we're not even thinking about this stuff, right?
That's so true. I haven't thought about that. I covered so many retirement homes, especially with the pandemic, and I sort of got this. Well, first of all, I know how horribly expensive it's getting. Yeah. But I thought, they're all around the same age. They're with each other. That seems like the way that it should be. But then I come from Europe, where people are living multi-generational homes, but I could never imagine myself like living with my parents. So it's interesting how different it is. But how did you come across Bitcoin?
So I was running that company, and I had a shared office space because bootstrapped it. So in like 2010, someone I was in the shared office space was talking to me about Bitcoin. But to me, first, it sounded like credit card reward points, because it was like he was explaining it on a very peer-to-peer level. And so I kind of wrote it off, and I was like, all right, you're the crazy MIT guy. Like, I will watch you through this journey. But, it was so early.
What year was that?
It was like 2010. No, it was like right when I started my first company. Yeah. Because I wasn't in that shared office space for long. So, and then I started doing some work with more like not this like thought leadership, I guess was the title, but like advisory work with Carnegie Mellon and UPMC, just and going out to Pittsburgh a little bit. It wasn't a ton, but it was enough to like give a perspective on what older adults need to age in their home safely. So everything from sensors and robotics to machine learning. Wow. And I was like, well, why there's a huge gap in careers working with older adults. Like there's a huge shortage of geriatricians. Why don't we value our elders more? And so that's kind of how I got into this idea of like, how do we preserve what they have, which is wisdom and insight and traditions, right? How do we transfer that to younger generations? Like, how do we, preserve it in a very pure way and then transfer that value? And to me, it was like, then Bitcoin made sense.
Well, how did you connect those dots?
So let's say you're, recording the story of an older adult, for example. You want it to be, if there's an edit in it, you need to have a record of the edit, so we're not rewriting history, right? So it's a very pure first-person story or insight. And then how do you transfer that value? Like fiat just doesn't make sense anymore, right? Yeah. So it's like the internet of value. So exchanging value in a really rapid way. And so, this is still too early for this, right? And we're seeing like ordinals and things like that, but this is still like future stuff.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up an interesting question. Why do you think we don't value our elders in America today as much as we did maybe decades ago?
It could be the migration patterns, right? Because in the US, when this country was founded, we weren't bringing a lot of older adults with us, because could they make the journey across the ocean, right? First of all, and then disease, they were more prone to, having weaker immune systems. And then we didn't just have like a ton of longevity, and we're starting and adapting to a new world, right? And then as you go across on covered wagons and the gold rush, very different set of values as we moved west. And so I think between that and, after World War II, single family homes, the suburban dream, the American dream is actually like a mirage. It's a prison, right? So using cars more, being isolated. It's not how we're designed. And so I think marketing and lack of insight of generations as we developed the US.
You know, it's funny. When I think of elder, I see kind of two groups. I think of sort of the average working person who is retired and is at that age. And I think wholesome, value driven, you know, I don't know. I think very positive connotations. And then in the other group, I think the people that are octogenarians who are representing us and have amassed so much wealth being public servants, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think they're so out of touch. Yeah. So I see some elders in this like amazing way where I want to learn from them and have their wisdom, you know, passed down and hear their stories. And then the other ones I'm like, get out of office. What are you still doing? Yeah. You know, put some young Bitcoin blood in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a power game, power and control, right? So these people have navigated this for decades and they know how to play the game because they're still making the game. And I think it's not necessarily an age thing. I think it's a sickness. You know, there's some rottenness in there for control and power, and it's pretty palpable sometimes. And I mean, there's back to Latin, right? This professor, we would go through stories, and the story of Cincinnatus was a farmer. So Cincinnatus was, I think, and please correct me, YouTube, when I'm wrong, but the way I remember it was a farmer who was elected by his community, did not put himself up for election to go represent them. Right? He did it because it was a duty, because his community chose him as the best. So he did it out of an obligation, not to brat, right, not to feed his ego, right? Or pride or whatever. And so I think we've really lost that, right? Mm-hmm. That value of like what it really means to be a representative has been totally 90% eroded.
Well, I know you do a lot of work with policymakers and in Washington, D.C. Was your first experience going to D.C. with some of your work with longevity or AARP?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So I had a fellowship with AARP around like innovation and longevity, and
that's a very big, important organization, by the way, and lobby group.
Yeah. And I think it's more important for us to not be so, it's really hard to hear people be like, we Bitcoiners were like the NRA. I was like, can you be more polarizing, right? Like what, you know, so this is where I think it's good to learn from AARP and how they work. They have 40 million members over the age of 50 who vote. So it's a very powerful organization in DC. So for the first time, working with older adults was cool. And I was like, wait, these staffers want to talk to me? This is weird, right? And so kind of learned how that world works a little bit. And so trying to take that into what we're doing now with work in DC around Bitcoin, take those lessons and move it into this.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners. First up, Bitcoin Conference 2023. This is the ultimate Bitcoin event every year, and it's going to be held once again in Miami Beach, May 18th through the 20th. Last year, there were about 30,000 attendees, and it's hard to believe the scale until you see it in person. There are incredible speaking sessions featuring the world's biggest Bitcoin voices, networking events, games, parties. I actually credit my career transition to the Bitcoin conference because I went for the first time in 2021, and that's where I dropped my first episodes of Coin Stories, not expecting this to become my full-time job at all, but just hoping to meet Bitcoiners and find more guests for the show. I actually went up to people like Michael Saylor backstage with a business card, and that's how I got him to come on the show. So anything can happen there, especially if you dream of working in the industry. Ticket prices go up every month until May, so don't miss out. And for 10% off, use the code HODL at b.tc/conference. I'll see you there. All right, next up, Fold. Fold is the best Bitcoin rewards debit card and shopping app in the world. You can earn Bitcoin on everything you purchase, from Amazon to groceries to sprucing up your wardrobe with Fold's Bitcoin Cashback debit card. And you can win free Satoshis every day or even play for the chance to win a whole Bitcoin by spinning the daily wheel and the purchase rewards wheel. I have an alarm set every day so I don't miss out on spinning the wheel and earning free sats. And it's also a great app to get someone that is totally new to Bitcoin. So if you want to join the fun, head to foldapp.com/Natalie and get 10,000 in free sats when you sign up. What has that work been like? Because I think that your book that you co-wrote, The American Dream, Bitcoin, The American Dream, it's so important because it really does make it apolitical. And it talks about how Bitcoin is good for small businesses and for boomers and for millennials and for minorities and for the right and for the left. So what's it like sharing that message in a place that I associate with so much division and polarity?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like living here and finding the diamonds in the rough, right? Like the real. And so that's the one fun part about it, is when you find a staffer that like gets it, or they're willing to learn and get it, and they kind of light up, because who knows how those network of, like, it's a very fast moving space, right? So you never know where folks are going to end up. I would say, we're trying to like transcend political divides, right? So it's like, this isn't even politics. And that's what's, I think, really hard for someone who's in politics their whole life. And it's like saying, like, you're a banker. This is totally different way of thinking. And anything that, destabilizes like control and power is like, wait, what? But it's going to happen anyway. I mean, that's like the direction we're going in. So either get on board or you're going to be left behind. And I think that's going to happen faster and faster. I mean, with innovation in technology, we're moving at an exponential pace. Like, we're going down this path of, AI, CBDCs, control, and then we have this other path as well. And so it's like, how do we balance things, right?
Well, so what is the strategy? I mean, I'm assuming that there's outreach on both sides. You're starting, with the staffers, trying to make your way up to people like, the AOCs. I mean, have you had success reaching, obviously not Elizabeth Warren, since we've seen her out there just chomping at the bit to close this whole industry down. But what has that been like? What are the challenges, and where have we made progress?
I think it's literally one staffer at a time, right? And so you find, I mean, there are some really interesting folks that are starting to get it and figure out how it can be helpful to their boss, really. So it's like, how is this useful for your boss, right? And
you can't start with like the person in the office. You can't start with the senator.
Sometimes, but it doesn't really. They're not the ones writing the bills. They're not the ones that are experts on the issue. I mean, they're such generalists that you need to find like the specialists and really get them to help them kind of understand it, right, and guide and there's a lot of curiosity right now, right? And I think especially we'll see during the next bull cycle, assuming there's the next bull cycle, it'll even ramp up more. The curiosity, it's same thing, right? NGU doesn't.
Has it been more challenging now with this sort of crypto debanking wave post-FTX blow up and the crypto meltdowns? It seems like there's, a lot more enforcement. They're trying to take action fast, and they're trying to cut off on-ramps that, I know Bitcoiners, we like to envision a world where you don't need the traditional banking system at all. And it's like peer-to-peer, but we're not there yet. And we may be decades away from there. We do need these traditional legacy systems to provide on-ramps and liquidity and banking solutions. So are we taking a step back to launch forward, or what do you think?
Yeah. And then it's like, how does Bitcoin survive if they really crack it down, right? How do public miners survive? So it's really important for folks to get involved at this point because there are so many unknowns. I don't have the answers. I mean, it could be really bad, and that's why. I mean, I'll be spending 2 months in DC because we're working on raising funds and hiring an executive director for the Bitcoin Today Coalition. So finding that person, and then also, doing the groundwork with them for a little bit in the beginning. And then we have an event in April. So we work pretty closely with Bitcoin Policy Institute. So they're a think tank. I think they're amazing. Grant and David, I really respect a lot. And they've done, just incredible work with their fellows. So they're going to host an event at the Press Club April 26th, which is like a very DC thing.
Yeah. I want to go.
You should go. And then we're going to do a day of hill visits the next day. So it's like that combination of, you know, the outer perspective, the macro of like, hey, we're here, we're doing this event, come participate, and then doing the behind the scenes of bringing these, you know, those of us that work in this and are advocates in this to meet with these staffers in office. So it's like kind of doubling the buzz, right?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about Bitcoin mining. You just mentioned publicly listed companies. You have an advisory role with CleanSpark, and you had a great panel on it at the Ski Summit. So what do you want people to know? I feel like some of my listeners, very familiar, really deep down the rabbit hole. Others still kind of curious, confused, listening to a little bit of the FUD that it uses so much energy. But what do you want everybody to know about the Bitcoin mining space and maybe what it's going through right now?
Right. So, I mean, mining is fascinating. It's been the most intimidating thing for me to learn about.
It's its own rabbit hole.
It is. Yeah. So, I'll speak for myself. So I believe that there's so much wasted potential in the world, and that includes energy. And I think it's like 20 to 30% of the global electricity created is just wasted. It's created, it's grounded, nothing is done with it. And that includes like, you know, hydroelectric, that could include solar, wind, I mean, all of it, right? Nuclear. And if we could take that wasted potential and turn it into value, so that includes jobs in rural areas where this energy is traditionally stranded or wasted, I mean, we're going to completely change the economies of like local communities, but states and countries. So that's what's interesting to me.
And how could you be against that, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, creating jobs, taking energy which has excess supply but not enough demand, and creating something profitable. And in a lot of these cases too, it is really providing an economic advantage to renewables that have not been able to basically function or compete in the market. That's what I've been more fascinated about. I'm trying to learn as much as I can that, you know, if we're going to make this movement, whether you agree with it or not, towards EV, towards solar, towards wind turbines, right now you have negatively priced energy in places. And the fact is the majority of the energy is sourced from fossil fuels because they're the lowest cost, they're the most efficient. And other countries don't care about our policies and how much they're driving up costs. So it's really interesting when you start to game theory it out. I mean, that's probably what sparked my real big curiosity into all these other areas of study that I never even thought about, was just how Bitcoin is energy. Right. Bitcoin is digital energy.
It is. It's beautiful. Like everything is energy. This encounter we're having is energy, right? Like this fire. And so when you start to think of things as everything is energy, right? And everything's in constant motion. Yeah. To stop that. And so that's why, you know, I think it's important to not hodl and wait it out, but it's also important to have liquidity in this, right? Like hodling could kill some aspects of innovation in Bitcoin. So that's where layer 2 is really interesting, because more of that money is, you know, more of that is moving around. And so, you know, with energy in particular, there's an abundant supply of energy. We and our regulations are limiting this as well, right? And so, you know, I really love like small nuclear reactors. We think we have to figure out for it to be financially sustainable, but you know, because of the regulatory environment, it's a lot to get these off the ground. But we have Idaho National Lab, which is like not too far from here. They're doing some amazing work in nuclear energy.
Oh, wow.
So Wyoming's one of the only states to build a new nuclear site in quite a while. So that's in Kemmerer, Wyoming, which is like 3 hours from here.
Oh, wow. Is there a lot of Bitcoin mining that happens in Wyoming or no?
No, and that's because public, you know, or utility companies are really difficult to navigate. They're like unelected officials, basically, right? And so we have our two largest utility providers are not based in Wyoming. So Wyoming Jobs, they don't care. They're trying to send the energy that's created here to California and other places generally, or other regions. And so that's why it's like, I really like co-ops and smaller groups, you know, at mining at scale, you know, with CleanSpark, they're doing hundreds of megawatts. So it's kind of hard to have these larger locations. But I think, as mining becomes more vertically integrated with energy, that'll be a game changer over the next few years, because there is so much instability, especially in these renewables.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's, what are we doing? It's total waste.
Exactly.
It could completely change their business model to have this hedge, right, and to have this flexibility.
I forgot to ask you earlier, but I was really curious about your experience working with David Chaum. I mean, how did you get involved, and what was that process like for you, just going down the rabbit hole of learning about DigiCash and like the evolution to Bitcoin? And, were you ever on that path of, oh, maybe these altcoins are good ideas, but then veering back to Bitcoin, or what was that journey like?
Yeah. So basically obsessed with wisdom, right? So had the opportunity to work with him on a privacy project before it was what it is now, before I even knew what the product was really going to be beyond like communications and payments. And I think that, privacy is, and this is his, thesis, is innately tied to human potential. And I agree with that, right? The more censorship and the more monitoring we have, the less creative and the less innovative the less risks we're going to take.
Of course.
Right. So, and with risk comes reward. So the less, less entrepreneurs who are doing amazing things in the world that just we're shutting them down, right, before they can get started. So, worked with him and was just like drinking from a fire hose around privacy. Bet. Yeah. Around privacy a lot, but did, through that kind of got to see behind the curtains of a lot of like crypto stuff, and it didn't really feel right. And I didn't know why. And it took me, working in it and fundraising with these crypto funds, pitching his privacy project, to see just how everything works, in the tapestry behind the scenes. And with Bitcoin, it's miraculous. Like, there's an immaculate conception. There's no VC money. It's a commodity through and through. Like, it's totally, totally different. Right. And so I came back full circle after, I think, like moving here. Yeah. Wow.
How did you even get connected to him? And where were you? This was after your work with Longevity?
I met him through someone else I knew who was working with him, but we were all in New York at like the same time around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then went to the West Coast again for the last time.
Oh my gosh. I feel like you've been everywhere. It's so interesting. I want to ask you about the American Dream, because not only is the book great, it's honestly one of my favorites, especially for someone with just very general knowledge. It's such a quick read, and it relates to literally everybody, every background, every age. How did that book come to be? And also on top of that, you said earlier, the American Dream, that idea of like the house with the white picket fence, the single family home in the suburb is like prison, which stood out to me, because I was like, oh, I don't see it that way, but I want to hear more about that. But tell us about the book, and then why you say that.
Yeah, I think so the book we started, Jimmy does these books, right? So I think he did Thank God for Bitcoin, and then he did one with Gladstein and a few others. So this is his third book, where he gets a group together and it's like a book sprint. So we were together for 5 days in Austin, 8 of us, totally different backgrounds, different political beliefs, or apolitical, right? And putting this together. And so it was a lot. It's like literally a product sprint. So we each took, the first night we had sticky notes of ideas, anything about Bitcoin, and then we grouped them together. Wow. And then each of us had a persona we were writing for. Mm-hmm. So mine was a staffer on the intelligence committee, right? So like, what's the hardest? Who's the most difficult person I could speak to? And, there's a lot of FUD around, the use of illicit activity with Bitcoin. That's like a big sticking point for some of these staffers. So that was kind of my focus. And then each of us took a crack at a couple of chapters. And then the next day, we looked at other people's chapters. And then we, for 2 days, edited together. And we had some volunteers edit as well. So it was just like massive project.
Why the American Dream?
Yeah. Why? I think it's kind of dead that's connected to so much debt, right? And to me, debt is kind of a form of control and I don't know if slavery is a very dramatic word, but it's a form of control and not being able to fulfill your potential as a human being, right? So if we were able to free people from that, what's next? And so to me, the American dream of the white picket fence, home in the suburbs, like, you know, all of this, it's because it's not really what we're designed to be doing. It's very much like a new, shallow way of thinking. So when we go back to more like ancestral, deep ways of living and how we've evolved over the years, I feel like we're devolving in this type of life now. And so how do we get out of like the BS of social media clicks and all that stuff, you know? And it's really hard because it's designed to like be a dopamine hit, right? That's how it's designed. And so how do each of us, or how, you know, for me, to get out of this kind of instant gratification piece? And so to me, it's dead. I mean, I owned a home for a few years, and I just honestly, it was like, oh, I don't want this, you know, like I'm supposed to do this, remodeled it, sold it, and never felt so free. Yeah.
I haven't thought about it in the way that you're describing it. It almost makes me think of that idea of a Pleasantville where everything's cookie cutter, everyone's the same. Yeah. No one has any unique thoughts or ideas or really anything about their material lives, which is totally negative for sure. But it's interesting because I have such a positive connotation with a different idea of the American dream, I guess, just being one of like opportunity, right? Just that idea of, if you want the house with the white picket fence, you should be able to work and achieve it without killing yourself and having your kids, you know, work multiple jobs and everyone going far into debt. And we don't have that anymore. We did at one point.
Right.
But now it's like both parents working. The kids, in my opinion, sometimes don't have role models at home anymore because everybody's just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And school's more expensive, and I don't know how useful all those degrees are necessarily. Right. And then you graduate and you're in debt. You go into jobs that are low paying, and you're just trying to like always catch up. And that's not the American dream to me at all.
Yeah.
But we could have the American dream. Like, what would the ideal American dream be for you and under Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I love what people are doing around like holistic living, right? So so kind of opting out of, okay, you have high blood pressure, you must take this medication. It's like, well, what if I change my diet? What if I try some herbs? Like, you know, that's fascinating to me. And then, you know, on the living side, I think, you know, grandparents used to help raise grandchildren.
Yeah.
I mean, the mom would usually be busy with the baby. The dad would, when we were more agrarian, would be out in the field, and the grandparents and grandkids would be like in a small garden, you know, doing a lot. So I think it's changed. How we live now is just not natural to us, right? And how we interact with each other is not natural to us. Like, it's not natural, but we are also evolving, right? So, you know, how do we kind of evolve in a less manipulated way is, I guess, this feels very manipulated. Like, you need to go to college and get $60,000 in debt to have a piece of paper that's useless, right? Yeah. I don't like the master's degree, and even finishing college. Like, I finished college for my mom because more than me, I was done, you know, and it was not fun finishing. But I did it because it's something I started, but it took me quite a while to finish it. And this, like, the masters, like, it was something to do during COVID, so I didn't go crazy because my career just stopped.
Yeah, Amanda has a very interesting master's called, what is it again?
An MS in Technology Commercialization. It's like what I already did. So it's just
very interesting.
Yeah, no, and it's a decent program. And that's like a way to think outside of the system. If you think you need an MBA, maybe go get an MS in 1 year, right? Because the MSs, those are the ones that are entrepreneurs that like do well, if you're thinking of it like that in game theory.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners. First up, CrowdHealth, a Bitcoin alternative to health insurance. Health insurance costs can be sky high today, and you essentially send money every month to a massive corporation, the health insurance black hole, as I call it. And if you don't need any health care, you never see that money again, right? But if you do need to go to a doctor, you end up having to pay even more out of pocket, especially if you end up as one of the 20% of claims on average that aren't covered. With CrowdHealth, you pay a small monthly fee that goes into an account that you actually accrue over time and is yours to use or keep if you ever leave. You can even save that money in Bitcoin. CrowdHealth is all about community, and the community crowdfunds everyone's healthcare. So if something does happen or you have a doctor visit, CrowdHealth will negotiate down the medical bill much lower than what insurance would be, and then the community helps you cover it. And in return, you help others cover their needs. For more information, you can head to joincrowdhealth.com/Natalie. And if you use promo code Natalie, you get 6 months for $99. All right, next up, iTrustCapital. iTrustCapital lets you invest in Bitcoin for your retirement with the tax benefits of an IRA. You can defer taxes on gains using a crypto IRA, or with a Roth IRA, you can withdraw tax-free at retirement. And here are some important things to know given the recent crypto contagion. iTrust does not lend against client assets. iTrust accounts are also FDIC insured up to $250,000 US, and iTrust does not hold customer assets or money. Assets are actually held between Coinbase custody and a custody platform called Fireblocks. And Fireblocks, by the way, underlies pretty much the entire industry. Their multi-party computation technology is the gold standard of custody for institutions and allows for private keys to be separated, encrypted, and shared across multiple parties in cold storage. So if you're doing retirement planning and considering adding Bitcoin to your IRA portfolio, you can sign up for an account and get a $100 bonus at itrust.capital/Natalie Brunell. So do you think Bitcoin can actually fix this? Do you think that a world under a form of money that can't be manipulated would allow us to reach our full potential in terms of a lifestyle that is more, I guess it's more like we were hundreds of years ago, but do we want to be like that?
I think there's a hybrid, right?
Yeah.
I think it's taking what is hurting us, you know, and us making the choice to take that out of our life. Like, I don't drink, right?
Yeah.
I haven't for 8 years, and I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made. So it's not just Bitcoin, it's also living an authentic, like, you know, we all want self-actualization. We all want to grow, and we all want to, I think, you know, deep down leave this place better than we found it, right? Yeah. But to do that, you gotta go inside first, and that's like one of the scariest places to be. So of course it's easier to be distracted by these things than to like go in.
Yeah.
I don't even have internet at my house.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally...
But you have an internet phone. You just don't.
I do,
okay.
Yeah. But I didn't have a hotspot for a long time.
Wow.
Like, I had an office space, then that would be the only place I worked.
Gosh, I feel like the majority of people would be lost without this for just 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I even think about, you know, when I was younger, we didn't have these for GPS. I'm like, how did I get places? I printed out MapQuest directions, but I made it. And my mom, she does not, she's about to be 70.
Wow.
She's amazing. She's not the type to put her phone, she doesn't have Waze. She's not going to put her phone on the dashboard to drive to visit me. She still does it the very old-fashioned way. She makes it.
Does she have a physical map, or she prints the map out?
Yes.
I love your mom.
Like, yes, and she makes it. She drives to visit me now in St. Louis, and it's like there are certain things where I feel like it was almost better, at least for our spirits and for our health, in the analog world as opposed to the digital world. And so I'm curious, actually, with everything moving towards AI now, and God, I can't believe some of the things that ChatGPT is doing. What do you think that world looks like when these things collide? Bitcoin may be fixing the money, but then we also have technology taking over all of our thinking and creating and doing and graphic designing. Yeah, I mean, what makes us unique is our life experience compared to AI, right? And that means the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what you do with that. And I think AI does not have that soul depth, right? It can do so much, but there's like a deeper layer to true creativity and true innovation that AI will never be able to do, right? I mean, the beauty of like emotions, right? I think so many of us try to numb out our emotions or like manipulate them instead of like going, maybe you need to feel sad for a little bit, or like when you're happy, go enjoy, like, amazing. That's like, you want to stay up here, right? Yeah. But we manipulate ourselves to be like, oh, I'm happy, I'm gonna go have some alcohol and bring myself to this low frequency to celebrate, like total mirages, right?
it's a depressant. It's like literally low vibe stuff. And so you think of like how all of these like things have been passed down for not just recently, but I mean, that stuff's been around for a long time, and go like super deep on kind of on yourself. That, or for me, like that's been the hardest journey I've ever taken, but I'm so glad. And it wasn't because life was great. Usually don't do this stuff because life is amazing. Like there's usually like a lot of pain for people when they're able to like go to that depth, right? And so that's what I like would love to encourage people to do, is to like I threw the book at everything, right? I moved here, nature, like somatic work, all sorts of things, rolfing, like, you know, just, yeah, detoxing from technology, different diet stuff, like everything. And it finally is like, oh, okay, like finally unlocking, you know, kind of like, yeah, kind of like cryptography. I finally like unlocked the code a little bit for myself, and everyone's designed differently. So it's worth it to keep going. And especially when you don't want to keep going, and what I found is like a lot of lessons were very difficult right before like a breakthrough. You're going to get tested really, it's going to be awful for a little bit. Like for me, it was like 6 months of hell, or maybe a year of real hell.
Really?
Yeah, before, like, this is all recent to me. I feel so good. I've never felt this good in my life.
Wow. And
yeah.
Was that the purpose of this sort of quest? Was it, you know, I'm seeking nature, I'm seeking these different alternatives to be happy, content, enlightened? Like, what was the end goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how we have some stuff down here that tries to keep pulling us down in life, right?
Yeah.
That's within ourselves, but it's also in our environment and the drama of life, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to feed that drama and stay down here, or are we going to stay up here, right? And so how do we stay up here? We have to let go of some stuff like pride, shame, fear, guilt. Ego. Yeah, like those are some of the hardest things to let go of, especially pride. Like that's never, you know, that's attached to ego so much. And so we all have that. And ego is also like a protective mechanism,
For
right?
sure.
Like there's a really good book. I think it's either Eastern body, Western mind, or flip it, dyslexic. So it might be the other way around. So Eastern body, Western mind. They talk about like chakra development, right? And I was like, when I was younger, I'd be like, okay, chakras, whatever. But now I'm like, oh, I actually get it. Like your base, your root chakras developed from like 6 months in the womb to like, 9 months, or some 6 or 9 months out of the womb. And like if you've had, a difficult like birth or like upbringing or whatever, there was a lot of stress in your beginning, like you might feel like you don't belong in the world. And I think that's, connected to a lot of suicides now. So it's just like everyone who's here belongs here, and you're supposed to be here, and everything is perfect the way it is. It's just keep pushing, keep like going in. And so then each chakra develops like through your age. So like adolescence, like up here, right? So if something, like if someone you were close to died, or something traumatic happened when you were like 12 years old, you're gonna be all like scattered up here. So I love that book because it'll take you through there's a really good survey, or I actually designed my own survey because I don't like exactly what they had on the back. So if anyone wants it, I should just make a picture of it for people. You can kind of like analyze like, oh, I've always had headaches, or like I've been restless, or like all these things. Right. You can see like, oh, that's connected to this, and meditation or art or music will help you like work through that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. A lot of Bitcoiners talk about the idea of Bitcoin assisting with ego death. I know Jeff has his company, Ego Death Capital. And something else you made me think of is I was going through a hard time last summer, and Preston Pysh actually recommended a book that he loves, and it really helped me through a tough time. And it's very much along the same lines of what you just mentioned. It's called Seat of the Soul. I don't know if you've read it.
No.
But it was really fascinating. It was this idea that we have psychology, we have the study of like our mind and our emotions to an extent, but we don't have this study of like our soul. Mm-hmm. And our soul is that higher self that's calling us toward the good, that has no ego, that is connected to the energy that is within all of us and in the world and universe around us. And it's all of our virtues. And that is where we go back to, I think also, like whatever you believe about before or after life, that's your soul. And if you believe your soul ascends, like it goes back to somewhere. But here in the material world, we have our personality, and our personality is the one that succumbs to vices and temptations, and it lives in the ego. And am I better than this person? Am I good enough? And that battle between the two, if we can be very aware of when we're exhibiting our best selves and going toward our soul, what our soul would want, as opposed to what our personality wants, we can live a more fulfilled, happy, joy-filled life. And like, I'm now so aware of it. Like, especially if I start to feel an emotion that I know is more driven by the personality, I catch myself. I'm like, how can I get back to my soul? And it's like you vibrate on a different frequency, like you mentioned. And going back to some of your longevity stuff as well, it's also the idea of connection. Like, we're all seeking love and connection in old age, young age, and we've lost a lot of that. We're more connected device-wise than ever, but we're also less connected than ever, I think.
Yeah, and that's part of the game, right? There's like, when we look up at the night sky, we aren't looking into the void. We aren't looking for the black in the sky, the ether, right? We are looking for the stars and the light, right? We are drawn towards light, and there's so many distractions in that, trying to keep, each of us from getting to that point. And I think that's where the real battle, you have to win it internally first, and it's brutal. It's really brutal. And that's where like the developmental stuff comes in, because we are all born with this perfect, beautiful soul, right? And then life starts putting things on us. But you're only given as much as you can handle. So when you can break through that, if you've had a very difficult life, like you were almost very fortunate in a way to have the opportunity to overcome very unique things that no one else in the world can understand, so that you can like thrive and be a light be a beacon for others, right? And that's like the really beautiful part about kind of this network effect, right? And like Bitcoin's kind of like a signal in that waking up. And I think more and more people are finding different modalities on how to do this, and it could take 50 years of meditation. I mean, there are totally different ways to do it. Like, I was just like, whatever. Let's just like throw it all, because I don't have a ton of time.
Well, I respect that. And, it really is true. Some of the most interesting, fascinating, successful, inspiring people went through the hardest situations. And I really think that when you have a why that you're working for, and you know your purpose, and it's something outside of you, that's when you can pretty much survive anything. It's when we get in our heads and we're just living for ourselves that that we start to struggle, I think. Yeah. All right, to wrap this up, this has been so beautiful to talk to you. Let's tie it back to Bitcoin. You kind of mentioned it. I mean, we're in this movement, and I think one of the greatest things, our panel yesterday, was building the future. We're building the future we want to see, not just complaining about the one we're in. Of course, we complain a little bit, but we want to change it. So what's your final message and takeaway with how Bitcoin can really, really help us become our best selves?
Yeah, I think it allows you to exit a flawed, corrupt system, right? And it's such a beautiful, I mean, whomever Satoshi is, what an enlightened human being to be anonymous, right? There's so much, I mean, the anonymity factor and not putting their ego into it, especially after having worked with some ego first in other aspects, in a lot of industries. It's one of the most beautiful, things I am extremely personally, very grateful for. I don't think it would have worked without this. And so that is the example, for us to strive towards, right? That is something, put it to the side and keep moving. And amazing things happen this, so grateful you all came out for the ski summit, because this is such a healing place for me. I want to share it with people I care about and that have so much potential as well, and our beacons as well, because it's something we can, radiate together. And it's just, such a unique group. Also, just good things start happening when you go in. And I didn't, CleanSpark, for example, I wasn't seeking a board seat on a public company. It was literally someone who I've known for years has been watching me change, I guess, and was you're so recommended. And it just kind of happened. Yeah. And so this is the evolution, right? We're all evolving. This is all evolving very quickly. I think the faster and harder we can each work on ourselves and go in, or at least for me, it's extremely helpful, and it's definitely not easy, but nothing, like we all know, nothing easy is worth doing. So exactly. That would kind of be my final takeaway, is the more we can like reward, genuine, authentic interactions and like value given, like Nostr, for example. There's no algorithm manipulating us to think this tweet is more worthwhile than this tweet. And like, it's really cool. I've been getting sats with like numbers, zaps with like numbers that are really cool. So I really appreciate people doing that. So I'm like, I see you, you're cool. Like money is also, these numbers are like messages. It's a way to communicate. And so I think that's how we kind of outsmart these future systems. We have to create our own like codes, right? And memes are amazing, and GIFs, like all these, different things. And it's really cool to be able to like move faster than what's, the heavy things that are coming.
I love it. Well, you contribute so much to the space. Thank you so much. Thanks for the ski summit. And where can people find you?
I have my Nostr connected to my Twitter. So Perfect. That's probably the easiest way. Nostrs. Let's do that.
And everybody read Bitcoin and the American Dream. That's fantastic book. Thanks so much,
Thanks
Amanda.
For having
this is great.
Me. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Again, hit like on the video and make sure that you have those notifications on so you don't miss out on any new episodes. And I would love to hear from you. If you have suggestions, feedback, guest requests, please email me at natalie@talkingbitcoin.com. Thanks so much.